Confirmed. Celtics finalize the deal. Numbers and impact. Deal of the year? Celtics fan, breathe. It's confirmed. That conversation that seemed like just a rumor turned into a closed deal, and the question now is simple. Was it brilliant or too expensive? If you're tired of empty headlines, source said, and getting lost with numbers, salary cap, and real impact on the squad, stay with me. In less than a minute, I will show you the values, what this changes in the rotation, and mainly, whether this contract puts Boston closer to the title or becomes a headache in 2025. Let's get straight to the point. Before I show you the values and the real impact of this agreement, do the following quickly. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any updates from the Celtics, because when news comes out, here you'll find out first and without any hassle. And leave a like now, because this really helps the video reach more fans and I bring more content at this level. Also, activate the bell, because if you add another movement or detail to this contract today, tomorrow, you will receive it instantly. Now tell me here in the comments just so I can feel the support. Was it contract of the year or too expensive? Did it close? So stay with me until the end, because I'm going to show you the point that almost no one is talking about, and it completely changes the reading of this agreement. Breathe with me for a second, because when we follow Boston closely, we learn one thing. The decisions that change a season almost never arrive with a bang first. They start quietly. A detail here, a movement there, a loose phrase from someone well-informed. And before you know it, what seemed like just backstage talk becomes the most important topic of the moment. And that's exactly where we are now. I want you to think as a fan and, at the same time, as someone who understands what title window means. It's not every year that a team looks at its own squad and is able to say with conviction, we have enough to compete up there. And, when you have this type of cast, what separates a great campaign from a run to the finals is almost always the same detail. Depth, balance, and quick response when the scenario changes. And the scenario changed. In recent times, our bottle has become an area that requires constant attention. We know the importance that names like Kristaps Porzingis, Luke Kornet, and Al Horford represent in terms of rim protection, defensive reading, rebounds, and above all, stability. It's not just statistics, it's presence. He is the type of player who organizes space on the court even when he doesn't touch the ball. And when these references are not available, the team continues to compete because the Celtics have structure and talent, but the risk increases. Risk of wear and tear, risk of emergency adjustments, risk of arriving at the toughest games with one less piece in the most physical place in basketball. And here comes the point that I want to talk to you as if we were side by side, analyzing calmly. This is not about despair or rush. It's about recognizing a real need before it becomes a problem too big to solve. Because it's one thing to survive a string of games. It's another thing to make it through the postseason. And when the intensity rises, when the opponent starts hunting matchups and exploring every inch of their squad, the reserve center stops being just a reserve. It becomes Plan A, Plan B, and at times, the difference between controlling the bottle or watching the game slip away due to details. In this context, Neemias Queta has been a very good story for the Celtics, and I say this sincerely. He is the type of player who grows when given responsibility, who delivers energy, who fights for every ball. This excites any fan. But as much as he has been a revelation at various times, the question that remains, and it is inevitable, is what happens behind him? What is the safety margin? What is the second response when the game calls for more body, more rebound, more space occupation? And that's why, when information starts to circulate that the front office is looking more closely at the center market, it doesn't surprise me. On the contrary, this seems to me to be the normal behavior of a team that is thinking seriously. It is not a bet on the fashionable name. It's a cold reading of what the squad needs to remain stable. And here's where the conversation gets interesting. When talking about the pivot market, the names that appear are generally the same. Players that everyone knows, who have high minutes, bigger contracts, high costs, and who, in practice, require you to change a lot of things to bring them. Ivica Zubac, Daniel Gafford, Nick Claxton. These are names that make sense on paper, but are not always achievable in the real world, either because the price is high, or because the team on the other side has no reason to negotiate, or because the financial arrangement becomes a problem. the head too difficult. And that's when, every now and then, an alternative emerges that doesn't seem so obvious to those who only look at numbers. A name that doesn't come with a flashy headline, but that, for anyone thinking about building a squad, makes a different noise. Kevon Looney. I know what a lot of people think when they hear that name. Looney is not that center who is going to put up 20 points a night, and I agree, but that's not the right question. The right question is, do the Celtics need a center who scores 20 points a night? Or do they need a center who does the work that sustains a championship team? Because there is a type of player who doesn't appear in the highlights video, but appears in every title. That guy who makes the block at the right time, who occupies the correct space, who doesn't get lost in the defensive exchange, who fights for the rebound as if it were the last one, who understands the rhythm of the game and doesn't demand anything more than what the system asks for. Looney is exactly that kind of play. And before anyone thinks, but that's not enough, I want to remember one thing. The Warriors' great campaigns, especially those that end with a trophy, were built on stars shining, yes, but also with players like Looney making those stars' lives easier. He doesn't need the ball to make an impact. He needs positioning, reading, and the willingness to do what many don't want to do. When you have Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, when you have a system that can already create good shots, what you can't lose is the foundation, consistent defense, and rebound control in decisive moments. And that's precisely where a center like Looney can be valuable. Now, I want to go beyond the court because there is another side that defines the viability of this type of movement: finances. The NBA isn't just about who plays best, it's also who can ride the best. And when you're competing at the top, you pay for it. Luxury tax, repeater tax, flexibility limitations, all of this weighs heavily. And Boston, as a team that thinks about titles, cannot act as if the future doesn't exist. It needs to compete now and at the same time maintain space to continue competing later. So when we talk about adding a center, it's not just who is the best player available. It's whoever fits in without destroying the cast's ability to adjust. And then a short contract with a team option gains enormous value because this is not just a clause on paper. This becomes a tool. It becomes a way to maintain control, evaluate the fit, adjust rotations, and, if necessary, move again without getting stuck. And here comes a point that I admire about Brad Stevens' work style as an executive, the constant feeling that the Celtics rarely make moves on impulse. When Boston moves, there is usually a clear reason, either to improve the fit, or to protect the team against risks, or to organize the financial path. And have you noticed how many champion teams gain advantages precisely in this silent part of the work? Sometimes, the move that doesn't make the front page is the move that saves the rotation in the playoffs. It is the movement that avoids unnecessary overload. It's the movement that allows stars to do what they do best without having to put out fires every possession. I'm not saying that Looney is the only possible answer. It's not that. I'm saying he represents a very coherent line of thought. The search for stability, for reliable minutes, for a player who understands the role and accepts the role. And do you know why this matters? Because in a strong squad, the biggest enemy of performance is often not a lack of talent. It's the lack of predictability. It's like you go into a big game without knowing if you'll be able to control the defensive rebound. You need to fold it into the bottle and open the perimeter. It's you adapting too much, because there is no one to hold the position with consistency. Now, let me bring you into this decision as a fan. What do you prefer when it comes to reinforcing the bottle? Are you the type who wants a big name, even if it costs more, requires more changes and changes more chemistry? Or do you see value in a more discrete movement, which improves the structure and reduces risk, even if it doesn't generate that immediate explosion in the networks? Because that's the real dilemma for a team aiming for Banner 18. Make the choice that seems most impressive, or make the choice that seems most intelligent. And here's a detail that I consider crucial. A team with title ambitions needs to think about multiple solutions. There is not just one path. Sometimes the ideal negotiation involves 3 teams. Sometimes it involves a team with space to absorb a contract. Sometimes it involves adjusting parts to maintain flexibility. And when you start to hear Brooklyn, Utah, and other teams being mentioned as possible facilitators in more complex negotiations, it fits perfectly with what the league has become, a board where the cost of each move goes beyond the player. It's cost, it's exception, it's fit, it's deadline, it's planning. Therefore, a center like Looney is not just a center. It can be the piece that gives you breath without taking away your future. He could be the choice that doesn't change the team's identity, but protects the team in moments when basketball gets tougher, slower, and more physical. And if you're thinking, but he's not young, I understand. But not every movement needs to be the pivot of the future. Sometimes the movement needs to be the pivot of now, one that holds minutes, that does not compromise, that does not require radical adaptation, that sustains the rotation. It's the type of signing that doesn't attract attention on the day, but that, in May and June, you'll be grateful for. Because in the playoffs, the game is decided by possessions, and possessions are rebounds. These are blockages. They are positioning. These are second efforts, and that's the natural territory of players like Looney. Now I want to make a proposal. Let's turn this into a real conversation. Write here in the comments what you think, but with a simple rule. Don't just answer with yes or no. Tell me why. Tell me what your fear is if this movement happens. Tell me what your hopes are if this movement happens. Do you think the Celtics need to prioritize defensive stability and rebounding in the paint, even if it doesn't bring points immediately? Or do you believe that to take the next step, Boston needs a center who also offers more offensive creation? And if not Looney, who would it be? Which name, within what is financially possible and within what makes sense for the system, would you prioritize? Because this is where the Celtics talk show becomes more than news. It becomes an analysis with fans. It becomes a well-founded debate. And I really like it when the community builds this reasoning together, because the best cast reading often appears in the details we exchange here. And of course, if you want to follow every signal, every movement, and every nuance, from what could happen to what makes sense to happen, I invite you to be part of the Celtics Talk Show community. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because when the league enters this window and negotiation period, things change quickly. And the difference between I heard and I understood what it means is exactly what we do here. To close, I leave you with a very simple reflection, almost like a summary of the moment. Boston doesn't need a big-looking move. Boston needs a movement that is big when no one is looking. A move that protects the squad, strengthens the paint, preserves flexibility, and increases the team's chance of arriving in one piece where it really matters. If Kevon Looney is that move, great. If it's another name within this same logic, that's great too. What you can't do is ignore the message that the season always sends. Whoever wants to compete until the end needs to be prepared for games that don't forgive weakness in the paint. Now I want to hear you. What is your reading? Is Looney the kind of piece that could help solidify a real path forward for Banner 18? Or do you believe the answer needs to be something else? Right here. I'm going to read carefully, because this conversation doesn't end in the video. It starts with him. And that's what a lot of people still don't understand. It's not about noise, it's about results. A team that wants to lift the trophy doesn't wait for the problem to appear. It solves it first. And if this movement in the paint really comes to fruition, the message to the league is straightforward. Boston is not testing the path. Boston is building the path to Banner 18. Now, I want you to do the following. Don't leave this topic here, because this story doesn't end in this video. It's just beginning. I left the Celtics Talk Show playlist in the pinned comment, with everything organized. Analysis, updates, rumors with context, and what each movement really means for our squad. So click on the pinned comment, enter the playlist, and marathon. Because if you want to understand what's happening, and above all, what could happen, that's where you'll always stay one step ahead. And before you go, leave it in the comments now. Are you bringing Looney to Boston, or would you go under another name? I want your opinion with argument. See you in the next video. And remember, you don't watch the news here. You follow the construction of Banner 18.